The policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word apartheid. And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily, and perhaps much better, be described as a policy of good neighborliness.
If I may say that I'm really not into apologizing. One, don't apologize for a system that somebody that you descend from dealt with in a certain way, as if that person created the system.
Hendrik Verwoerd took it personally when he said that when I take control of the Bantu, of the natives, of the black people, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with the black people to ensure that this separate development really happened, to make sure that they never really grow, they never do certain jobs, they never get certain opportunities in society.
Such an entrenched social system that had such devastating consequences that everything is dictated to it, your spatial design. The fact that black residential areas were designed to be away from the places of work.
The difference in income between the richest and the poorest people in South Africa was at the end of apartheid defined by race. It's still defined by race.
Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd was an immoral man. I decided to stab him. And I killed him.
This year marks 50 years since Hendrik Verwoerd's assassination. This week, in part one of a two-part series, we turn the spotlight onto Verwoerd's socio-economic legacy in post-apartheid South Africa. The start of 2016, a racist storm explodes around comments posted by Durban property agent Penny Sparrow. On her Facebook page, she refers to black beachgoers as monkeys.
What Penny Sparrow said, that was a natural issue to explode on social media. I mean, it was offensive, it was racist, and once it got out there, it was unlimited.
The Race Institute of South Africa's Sarah Gon says social media seems the perfect platform where these racial wars of words could explode.
You can go onto social media at your own behest. You can say what you like, freedom of speech, unless it infringes into hate speech. You can direct it very widely. It can be picked up by others and it can explode. And that's exactly what happened.
But the controversy around Penny Sparrow was only the beginning of a string of racial storms unleashed onto social media. The racial divides between South Africans seemed deeper than ever before. Then came this report by the South African Institute for Race Relations, ironically released around the same time as the Penny Sparrow controversies. Its findings on racism surprising in a society where race often dominates the social discourse.
What it revealed was very interesting. Not to say that racism doesn't exist. It didn't say that. It didn't say we're a rainbow nation. But what it did say is that only about 4% of South Africans feel that racism affects them. They were much more affected by unemployment, by crime, and by poor education. Those are the themes that kept coming up over and over again. So the lived experience is that whatever racism may exist in the society, it is not a major impediment to South Africans.
Professor Vuyisile Msila heads the African Renaissance Centre at the University of South Africa.
It really does. That's very interesting to have such results in a study. Because especially now, we are at a time where we find that there are so many things that the reconciliation project never was able to achieve. That is why you'll find that if you look at social media where people are, writing about or talking about their ideas on race and identity and so on. And sometimes it can be very rough. Sometimes people can use very strong language against the races and so on. So yeah, it is still there. There are still many problems that we find in the society when it comes to race and identity.
We're still divided in space between white and black, between rich and poor. The more unequal a society is, the less it coheres as one society, because people's realities are radically different.
Stuart Wilson, Executive Director from the Social and Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, says race still determines one's life experience in the country.
Rich people can afford to live in well-located pieces of land. Poor people can't. If most or nearly all poor people are black, and if most or nearly all rich people are white, then the urban form, the urban segregation that was crystallized under apartheid isn't going to be significantly challenged.
The Western colonization project, if you want to call it like that, was not a very kind project all over the world, like no colonial project ever,
Wynand Boshoff, one of Hendrik Verwoerd's grandsons, says it's fallacy that colonialism and later on apartheid only benefited white South Africans.
50 years after decolonization, Africa has not regained its balance. And you have one part of the population who is actually Western, black and white, who are very much at home in a Western culture and economics as a part of culture. And you have a very large part of the community who are not, of the society who are not. And that's a problem.
In his biography on Verwoerd, author Henry Kenny notes Verwoerd's goal to make apartheid impossible to dismantle. Did Verwoerd and his National Party government achieve this? Right from the onset of Verwoerd's apartheid scheme, there was resistance, mostly by black South Africans. It would take another 3 decades for the system's political demise. But did the dawn of democracy dismantle apartheid's legacy?
Inside us all lurks greatness, bravery, guts, determination. Every time you get down, you get back up. You take us all forward. You raise the bar. And we salute you, party comrade, with a Heineken Cool Can and Strongbow Apple Cider 6-pack combo for just 100 Rand from Tops at Spa.
Dr. Hendrik French Verwoerd was born in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, making him the only South African leader born in a foreign country. As a young boy, he moved with his family to South Africa. His father was sympathetic to the Afrikaner cause following the Second South African Anglo-Boer War. Verwoerd entered politics at the height of Afrikaner nationalism.
We had a situation where the white population with the vote regarded white dominance in South Africa as something permanent. And the question was, would it be English dominated or Afrikaans dominated?
The policy of racial segregation and separate development was first publicly referred to as apartheid by Prime Minister D.F. Malan. And it was on this ticket that the Afrikaner-dominated National Party won the 1948 election. In 1950, Verwoerd was appointed Minister of Native Affairs in the Malan cabinet.
He brought Native Affairs to the center of South African politics with a very good, well-developed realization that the struggle between Afrikaans and English white South Africa is actually a sideshow in the great picture of things.
Even when he was a Minister of Native Affairs, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with the black people to ensure that this separate development really happens. Planning the reserve for black people and so on and so on. To make sure that they never really grow, they never do certain jobs, they never get certain opportunities in society. So it's something that he planned personally.
It was the laws that Verwoerd drafted and enacted in this ministerial capacity that credits him as the architect of apartheid. His so-called grand apartheid policies, like the Group Areas Act, would socially engineer South Africa along racial lines for decades to come. It led to the establishment of separate living areas for the different race groups in the country. It meant millions of black South Africans had to be uprooted through forced removals, and the new pass laws which strictly controlled the movement of black people in all areas across the country.
It is often said that Verwoerd was responsible for race classification. It had not been. It had been the initiative of the Department of Home Affairs. Those categories which had existed before 1948, before registration, before that law, before Verwoerd, those categories still exist. And to a great extent, they still determine, it still determines people's place in life.
Apartheid started long before him, during the British colonial governments. You know, after the South African War, the Afrikaners decided to start the Christian national education, where, you know, it was very easy to see that they were separating black people from white people. But coming to Hendrik Verwoerd, he took it personally when he said that when I take control of the Bantu, of the natives, of the black people, I'll make sure that, you know, there are job opportunities that they will never get, you know, because they should not move beyond being hewers of wood and drawers of water.
It was such an entrenched social system that had such devastating consequences that everything is dictated to it. Your spatial design, the fact that black residential areas were designed to be away from the places of work. You don't change those overnight. In order for people to move, it requires a certain amount of economic mobility. That then is tied to education and opportunity.
The other major legacy apartheid has left is the spatial form of South African cities. We're still divided in space between white and black, between rich and poor. The areas in which African people were allowed to live in urban South Africa were far away from the urban core, far away from economic opportunities. They were really just dormitory townships to accommodate people while they were in white South Africa doing the job that they were employed to do.
But it was the later so-called petty apartheid policies, such as the Reservation for Separate Amenities Act, that seemed the most visible at the time.
He realized, and it's on record on several places, speeches in Parliament, personal communications with people, that the whole policy of apartheid, petty apartheid, is causing unnecessary pain and frustration with black people, and that we have to move beyond that to a South Africa where all peoples would be free.
I'm sure if you were to ask people in the street whether they know the differences between petty apartheid and the grand apartheid, many won't even understand what you're talking about, because for them apartheid was just apartheid. And so it doesn't matter whether one calls it petty apartheid or grand apartheid, because of the impact that apartheid in general had on people.
Across South Africa, resistance against apartheid policies grew, and the international community called for a boycott against the country. In early 1960, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan visited South Africa and gave his historical Winds of Change speech, signalling the end of British support for white rule in South Africa.
This experience of our own explains why it has been our aim in the countries for which we have borne responsibility, not only to raise the material standards of life, but to create a society which respects the rights of individuals, a society in which men are given the opportunity to grow to their full stature. And that must, in our view, include the opportunity of an increasing share in political power and responsibility.
We also see ourselves as a part of the Western world, a true white state in Africa, with the possibility of granting a full future to the black men in our midst. We are the link. We are white, but we're in Africa. We link with both, and that lays upon us a special duty. And we realize that.
A month after this speech, hundreds of black protesters gathered in Sharpeville near Vereniging to demonstrate against the pass laws. Police opened fire on the unarmed crowd, killing 69 and injuring 186. The massacre would signal a big change in the resistance movement against apartheid. It led to massive anti-pass laws demonstrations across the country. And international calls grew stronger to sanction South Africa. On the 9th of April 1960, at the opening of an agricultural show in Johannesburg, Verwoerd was shot in the face by English businessman David Pratt. Verwoerd survived the attempted assassination. Following the previous year's referendum, South Africa was declared a republic on 31 May 1961, a long-term goal of the National Party. Shortly after this, amid great international pressure, South Africa was shunned from the British Commonwealth because of its apartheid policies. Verwoerd remained steadfast, and his popularity among white, mostly Afrikaner supporters grew. He received a hero's welcome back in South Africa.
Hier op Jan Smuts Lughawe staan ten minste 50.000 mense. 'n Volksmassa bank vas in hulle oortuigingsdrif en wag op ons leier, Dr. H.F. Verwoerd, wie se vliegtuig pas neergestryk het. Die gelykte ten noorde van die hoofgebou is 'n see van vaandels, van vlae, baniere, een wapperende, winkende welkomsgroet.
Lieve vrienden, wat ons gedoen heeft ons voor Zuid-Afrika gedaan. En ons verdient daarvoor geen lof nie, want daar was geen ander keuze.
Amid growing opposition against apartheid, Verwoerd banned several liberation organizations, including the PAC and ANC, and arrested some of its leaders.
There are many people who feel that the reaction of the government to our stay at home, ordering a general mobilization, arming the white community, arresting 10,000 of Africans, the show of force throughout the country. Notwithstanding our clear declaration that this campaign is being run on peaceful and non-violent lines, close the chapter as far as our methods of political struggle.
At the Rivonia trial in June 1964, several leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment on Robben Island. This would shape South Africa's future for decades to come. And in hindsight, many believe it put the country on a path to the brink of civil war.
It's easy to refer back with all the hindsight and say, oh, one should have done that, one should have done that, or that is not a proper way of speaking, or what. And if I may say that, I'm really not into apologizing. One, don't apologize for a system that somebody that you descend from dealt with in a certain way, as if that person created the system. Because it's not difficult to look at the system and say, well, that's bad.
So there is no way one can say that he cannot be personally liable. He actually called it himself, that I'll make sure that when I have control over these people, that I do this and that and that. So it's something that he planned personally. Of course, one would agree that it was a program that he joined, he endorsed when he became the minister, but he really made everything to be very clear as to which direction apartheid should take.
We make sure to be where news is happening,
both locally and globally. For the latest business news, stay with us.
From South Africa to the world, we've got all your latest sporting news.
Don't miss our weather updates every hour.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday, from 3 to 5:30 p.m. here on SABC News.
On 6 September 1966, shortly after being re-elected as Prime Minister, Hendrik Verwoerd addressed the House of Assembly. Minutes later, he was stabbed to death by a parliamentary messenger, Dimitri Tsafendas. Tsafendas was declared insane under the apartheid regime and spent the majority of his life in Pretoria's central prison.
I was born in Lorenzo Marques, the capital province of Mozambique.
Under the democratic dispensation, Tsafendas was later moved to the Sterkfontein Psychiatric Hospital until his death in 1999.
I don't remember much. I do remember that I stabbed him and that the blade, the dagger, had a kind of anti-rust solution on it. And I did not take it off when I stabbed Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd.
A few weeks before assassinating Verwoerd, Tsafendas, who was from mixed race descent but classified white, unsuccessfully tried to get reclassified as coloured.
These blonde people gave me an inferiority complex. I used to feel inferior before them. Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd was an immoral man. I decided to stab him, and I killed him.
A quarter of a million Verwoerd supporters, mainly white, attended his funeral in Pretoria, despite worldwide condemnation for the unjust laws he enacted as part of his grand apartheid master plan. Verwoerd supporters remained loyal to him until the end.
Duisende mense het die strate van Pretoria belyn by die begrafnis van Dr. Verwoerd. Die groot opkoms was 'n weerspieëling van die eensgesindheid wat reeds in daardie stadium onder blanke Suid-Afrikaners, Afrikaans en Engelssprekend geheers het.
50 years after Verwoerd's death, South Africa still grapples with racial tensions. January this year, a small group of people, including the ANC's Zitsi Gotwa, opened a criminal case against Durban estate agent Penny Sparrow for the racist remarks she made on Facebook.
To come and lay a charge of crimen injuria and incitement to violence. South Africa has never been so racially polarized like it's been today or over the past few days. And I think it's important to take a stand, to unite against racism.
Penny Sparrow was also reported to the Equality Court for hate speech.
Having regard to the powers conferred on the Equality Court under Section 21 of the Act, I make the following orders. The words posted by the respondent on her Facebook page on 3 January 2016 constitute hate speech as defined in Section 10 of the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act. Payment of damages in the sum of 150,000 rands payable by the respondent to the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation.
She had been ostracized, she had been criticized, she had lost her home, she had lost her job, she'd become destitute. That is a pretty considerable punishment for having racist thoughts. Then she went to the Equality Court where she was fined 150,000 rand and determined that she'd committed hate speech. And now she's gone to the criminal court and be found guilty and been charged a further 5,000 rand. A lot of people have said we must criminalise hate speech, we must criminalise racism, we must legislate more. As an institute, we don't believe more legislation helps. We don't think you get more or better results from more legislation.
Legislation won't help. What we need is to go right to the basics. Let's look at the family as a unit. What can families do to change the attitudes of children, to change the attitudes of everybody who's in the community? Because the problems we have really don't need government. Government can legislate, but if the people don't follow, then it won't help.
May 2016, racist Facebook posts by Pretoria High Court Judge Mabel Jansen drew wide condemnation.
With gender activist Gillian Schutte, in private correspondence, Judge Jansen implied that rape was part of black culture and that 99% of cases before her had to do with the rape of black minors.
In recent weeks, Cabinet green-lighted a bill to criminalise hate speech.
You know, people usually ask me, well, how do we make South Africa cohesive, unified South Africa? Well, I don't think South Africa can become a cohesive and unified country. It is sometimes cohesive and it is sometimes unified. And it sometimes isn't. I don't think that's abnormal in a society. What's abnormal is to pretend that we're all going to have the same view on something, and that is how it should be. That's not how a democracy works. Democracies are messy places.
My place in a democratic South Africa, I would say I would just leave the fact that I descend from somebody whom I didn't know because he died before I had even been born yet, is that democracy is fulfilled when the ethnic variety of South Africa is recognized even in the Constitution and in everyday realities.
Maybe we are in a hurry to make sure that our democracy comes to fruition sooner, and there are many other blind spots that we didn't really attend to. There are so many things that the white population can do, especially when you look at the past. People feel that, especially black people, that they never got the kind of redress that they would have liked to get from such a process.
22 years into our democracy, race identity still dominates the public discourse. August 2016, Pretoria Girls High School learners gather at their school in what would become known as the so-called hair protests. The learners accuse teachers of racism and enforcing a white-centric hair policy at the school. Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi met with the girls to hear their grievances.
Angered, and I did nothing about it. What was there to fix? What is wrong with my coil-filled hair? After she insisted that I do something to my hair, I left and asked to sign into my exam venue. I couldn't believe it. And somehow I wished I didn't see those jarring words leave her mouth.
The pain they're going through is not the pain in this school alone. This is the pain that majority of our learners in majority of our schools are going through the same pain. So we need to intervene. So our intervention here is not going to be an intervention about this school alone. It's going to be an intervention about the problems that we have of transformation, diversity, representativity within our school environment, where people still believe the color of a certain individual is more important than the color of the other person.
A few days later, a similar protest took place at a Cape Town school.
They are what I call the democracy generation. We are the apartheid transition democracy generation. We don't know whether we're coming or going, but they know where they're coming or going. And I've seen some extraordinarily honest and robust exchanges between young adults of different colours who've gone to school together. And that is probably the most wonderful place to have mixing, because they are exposed to each other. They'll deal with their likes and they'll deal with their dislikes and their agreements and their disagreements. Those are commonly shared experiences.
50 years after Verwoerd's death, a democratic South Africa's so-called born-free generation is still grappling with race identity and race politics. On university campuses, a slightly older generation is taking on a different battle. In part 2 on the legacy of Verwoerd, we turn the spotlight on the education system and ask, are protesting students at the forefront of dismantling apartheid's legacy?
Whether you're looking for a restaurant, public transport, or a university, a lot of us use our smartphone apps to find the closest one. On Network, we chat to those who play a role in Africa's tech space.
We have taken financial services closer to the people. Yeah, mobile penetration is pretty high.
Apple take 30%, keep 70%.
On Network, we give you Africa's social media and technology news. That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.